Hello and welcome to another exciting special edition of the Scottish Liberty Podcast. I'm here with John McLinden of Edinburgh Theatre Arts, and he's doing a show this year at the Fringe on the Enron Scandal, appropriately titled Enron. Hello John, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, very well.
So,
You're Antony Sammeroff, I'm Tom Laird.
It's difficult to get everything that you need to get into an intro sometimes. So, thanks very much for joining us today. So, first of all, tell us a bit about yourself and your background in theatre.
My background in theatre is that as man and boy, I've been with Edinburgh Theatre Arts.
Right.
So we're talking about over 40 years now.
Wow.
I'm now chairman of the company as well as being an actor and director with the company. And although we are an amateur company, we set very high standards, and we have a number of our former members who are now making their name professionally.
Right.
So really we really are a staging post for some people to move on and do greater things. But we always try to do plays that are different, relevant, and our base is in a church hall.
Okay.
But it's amazing what you can do with a church hall to turn it into a theatre venue.
All right. And is the venue that you're doing the play Enron at the moment, is that church hall, or is it?
It's a church hall.
Okay.
In fact, we rehearse in the church hall all year.
Okay.
And then we do a show in the spring, and then we do 2 weeks in the Fringe and various other activities like bun suppers and things.
Okay. What's the venue?
It's in Ninian's Hall in Cumbernauld Road.
Oh right, it's just round the corner for me. I've got
right
no
next to Waitrose, right next to Waitrose.
Yeah, fantastic.
Opposite Forest Stevenson's, yeah.
Okay, yeah, good. What's the capacity of that?
The capacity is 65.
All right.
On a good night, it could be more than that, but that for licensing purposes, it's 65.
And are you getting close to that at the moment? Or?
Last week, yeah, we were pretty full all week, and we've got 2 pretty full nights this week. Monday and Tuesday are a bit lighter, but it usually builds up towards the end of the run. So we expect to be playing to full houses by the end of the run. So,
right. Okay.
But what we tend to do is that we bring in professional staging and blacks and set up a stage, and then the proximity of the audience to the action is pretty great, which gives great advantage to some plays.
Right.
The other thing I like doing as a director is doing challenging work that has us thinking about how best to use the space.
Okay.
Right, and what have you done there before?
Well, I've directed David Copperfield, The Tale of Two Cities, Moll Flanders, and an Arthur Miller play called The Ride Down Mount Morgan.
Okay.
Last year, one of my fellow directors directed Noises Off there.
Yeah, the Frame, Michael Frame.
The Michael Frame play, and I couldn't believe that we could actually pull that off in a church hall, but we did, because we've got a fantastic stage designer who managed to design a revolving set with 7 doors in a church hall. So, but these are the challenges. This is what makes theatre interesting, I think, for me. Anyway.
But it's so far so traditional there. This one would seem like a bit of a departure.
I think I always pick up bits of news about plays and then decide that I'm quite interested in doing them. Enron came about because I saw it was on Edinburgh at the King's. This is going about 4 years ago.
Right.
Had 5-star reviews in London.
Okay.
Wow.
So I thought I'll go and see it, not knowing a lot about Enron, and what impressed me most about it was its accessibility.
Right.
But it was also a high-tech show.
Right.
So you're using things like lightsabers, but and using devices to illustrate things that were off the wall.
Right.
So that was it, and we then had a couple of years ago we had a reading of it and felt that we could at least read the play, and it was just a case of just moving from there to actually getting into production.
Okay.
It's interesting because I thought, given the subject matter, it can be quite heady, quite technical. Not everyone's into corruption, conspiracies, and the details. So it would be interesting to me how you make that into an accessible theatre format that people would find both educational and entertaining.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's full of problems, but my main focus in all of this was to tell the story,
right,
which meant making sure that we delivered the dialogue in a way that was accessible to an audience. So there's a film recently called The Big Short, which covered subprime mortgages, but it used the same devices to make it accessible to audiences.
Mm-hmm.
The writer, Lucy Prebble, it was first performed at Royal Court Theatre in 2009. She's a genius in the way she can use things to make it clear to people what's happening. And some of them, I wouldn't want to spoil the impact of it.
Right.
But basically, the focus was very much on making sure that any opportunity we had to have characters talk to the audience, we used that. Because the play is built around 4 main characters, 3 of whom are the named people from the Scandal. The 4th one, the woman in it, the name's changed, but it's pretty obvious the same person.
So I'm imagining one of them would be maybe Skilling or Anderson?
Jeff Skilling, Andrew Fastow, Ken Lay, who was the boss, and then Claudia Rowe, as she's called in the play. All the rest of it, I call them grotesques, but basically it's built around actors playing multiple parts, from traders to stock analysts to the device things that make the play pretty interesting.
So many cast members in total?
There's 13 in the cast, playing probably about 40 characters.
That's an odd number for a suspicious lot like actors. But
well, it was 12. Then I found I had to play a couple of parts myself.
Right. Okay.
Because when I had to start casting early because I had to make sure I could do it. But other than the 4 main characters, it was about having the right number of actors around and then slotting them into the roles. So the play, which is in 3 acts, but we're doing it in 2 acts, the 3rd act is device free, so it is straightforward drama. And what I wanted to do was make sure I had the right actors in these roles, and then just work backwards to fill in all the other roles.
Okay, great. So you had the most important structures in place first, and saw what you were what you could be facilitated.
So I had really good actors playing perhaps small parts because I needed them there, but they then went on to play 3 or 4 other parts in the cast.
Okay.
Great. So why don't you fill us in and tell us a little bit about the Enron scandal itself, how it unfolded and what the implications of that are?
Yeah, I mean the background to the whole thing was that Enron were obviously an energy company. They were in natural gas, and then they moved into electricity. At that time, they introduced a new accounting system called mark-to-marketing, which basically was signing deals for 20 years, but taking the profits now. Right. So it was. What the example used in the play by Jeff Skilling is you sign a deal to make champagne, but the champagne's not going to be ready for ages, but you can take the profits now, and that was mark to market. And although it was a new concept at the time, it's now very much the thing that's used in the business world. They then found that Jeff Skilling wanted to go away from the hardware of energy and start trading energy on the stock market. So basically, they would control the price of things, and they would buy the stuff from other companies. So that was the principle. But very soon they got into trouble because obviously the profits weren't really coming through. They were getting,
but nothing near what they projected.
Yeah, nothing was coming through. So this is where Andy Fastow got involved, and he suggested that they could actually create fictitious companies and put all the debt into the fictitious companies. And then once they made money, push it back again. Well, of course, what then happened was that it didn't. And Just going back a step, this whole play is based on a book called The Smartest Guys in the Room.
I remember seeing the docudrama, and it was very compelling.
Yeah, that's right. So that's Lucy Prebble's play is based on that.
Okay.
Right.
And he devised things. He called them raptors.
Yeah.
Basically, as in Jurassic Park. So he had a raptor, taking care of one aspect of death, and so on and so forth. And the manifestation of the raptors in the play is one of the highlights.
Okay. Oh, right.
So they become physical. They become physical.
Right.
So what then happened was that the key thing that was going to influence the success of this was deregulation of electricity.
Right.
Claudia Rowe, in the meantime, had got permission to build a plant in India, which she did. So the whole then builds up towards the 2000 American elections, and if you remember, it is when George Bush got in.
Right.
After recount after recount.
Oh yeah, right, got you.
And California deregulated electricity.
Right.
But basically, this started a free for all, and California was in blackout for ages.
Yeah.
And then, of course, 9/11 came along,
right,
and the markets just went, through the floor.
Yeah.
And so everything got worse and worse and worse, and eventually, the three guys were actually convicted.
Yeah.
Fastow blew the whistle, so he was out in 2011, I think. Ken Lay had a heart attack after he'd been convicted.
Yeah.
And Jeff Skilling was given 24 years,
right.
But it was reduced to 14 years when he actually paid over $45 million to the employees.
Right.
And he's due to be released January next year.
Okay. And how come there was, as I recall, there was also a major, a huge audit company who were also complicit in the thing. And then I think at first they were saying, well, what's going on here?
Yeah.
They were spotting all sorts of anomalies. But eventually, I think Enron managed to put pressure on them to play along.
Basically Arthur Anderson went to the wall as a result of this. And that's where my interesting story comes in, because I was speaking to an American gent during the week, and he was telling me that he had two friends who worked for Anderson.
Okay.
And he was telling us, he was telling us that only a few guys had been responsible, because basically what happened was they started shredding all the documentation.
Right. A real cover-up.
It was a real cover-up, and that's what happened. So I was explaining to this guy that you ought to see how Arthur Anderson is represented in the play. So I'm not going to spoil it by telling you, but that's one of the tricks that Lucy Prebble used to illustrate Arthur Anderson's role in all of this.
Right, okay.
But they went out of business as a consequence of this. And the Lehman brothers are also involved in a scene, which is again another device used to make it. One thing about it is it's very funny, as well as being a serious drama.
Right.
So humour plays a big part.
Humour goes a long way in theatre when you're dealing with weighty subjects.
Well, I think that's why all these effects were brought in, because it could be pretty dry if you didn't have this. But one advantage we have in our venue is that because of the proximity of the audience, you're more inclined to listen to the story.
Yes.
Right. So our focus has been on telling the story of what happened to these four people, and she's got a wonderful way of writing monologues for each of the characters,
right,
to deliver straight to the audience. So hedging is explained, various other investment terms are explained to the audience. In a monologue, and there's also a historical lesson by Ken Lay on Ford and Arthur P. Sloan, General Motors and Ford. So there's historical stuff. It also uses television. So we have two televisions set up, and that plays music and footage from the 90s, and then moves on. It's a key component of the election scenes, and then there's a very, very poignant reference to 9/11.
Okay.
So that is part of it, and it also has some music, and the trader scenes are done in a very different way. They're not straight drama.
Right.
There's music involved and dance involved in that.
Dance as well?
Yeah. So we had a choreographer, a musical director, and a vocal coach.
Good.
Involved in all of this, yeah.
And how long? What length are we coming in at for the play itself?
Well, interestingly, for some reason we put 2 hours in the Fringe brochure, but you know what it's like to do that well before you're anywhere near rehearsing.
Yeah.
But it runs for 2 hours 40 minutes.
Wow.
That is taking out the second to third interval.
Okay.
Whoa. So it's an hour, and now it's 2 hour and 10 segments.
And you've managed to also get it. I mean, you've got it into 2 acts as opposed to 3. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Have you lost any of the?
No. Because basically, I've got 2 copies of the original script, and the first one I looked at was even longer.
Mm-hmm.
And what Lucy Prebble had done in the second version was to cut down the third act. So the third act only lasts 25 minutes. So even from the point of view of having a break and then 25 minutes, it didn't make sense. But basically what happens is at the end of the second act, Skilling is down the tubes.
Yeah.
The third act starts with Ken Lay coming back to take over the company and moves on to really the trial.
Yeah.
And then ends with a wonderful speech by Jeff Skilling at the end, explaining where he came from, and it shows that he was not a bad man. He just felt strongly about certain things, and he wanted the company to be successful.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, this is often the case with these kind of things. You know, it's not we like to look for and see monsters, but it's the frightening thing. It's ordinary blokes or guys just like you and me who make decisions, and then when they find that maybe it wasn't such a good decision, what do? Do we back out of this and lose it all now, or just keep going and cross your fingers and hope that it's all going to come right and all the pieces are going to fall into place?
Yeah, and then he's got a wonderful line where he said, someone said, but how do you know you're innocent? And it says, I know I'm innocent, and being innocent makes you innocent. And that was right at the end of the play when he was waiting to be sentenced. You know? So he still felt that he had done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And in some respects, because he's got another lovely speech where he talks about what business is about, where you're taking advantage of things, and all he did was try to take business advantage.
Yeah.
And that's the world he was operating in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there seems to be the camp's always divided on these things. You get I would suppose what you would call a left-leaning outlook that says, look, here's what happens when you deregulate. You know, this is the kind of thing. And then there's the other side of it, I suppose, which as libertarians we would come across and say, well, look, what happened here was it was rent seeking, it was monopoly. Yeah. This was big business in collusion with powerful with government even in order to keep themselves afloat. When ordinarily on a completely free market they would have went down.
That's right. I think that's right. It was to keep this thing going in spite of the fact that there was nothing there.
Yeah.
Because at the end, Andy Fastow says, Jeff says, we've got 20,000 employees that've got shares on our company. Yeah. We can't go down. We're not a black box. And Jeff Skilling says, Andy Fastow says, we are a black box.
Yeah. But too big to fail, is that?
Too big to fail, and just gets worse and worse and worse.
Why do you think, as a society, as a group of people, why do we never seem to learn from these things? I mean, you can go right back, probably before this, but the example I always think about is, I don't know if you've heard of Tulip mania.
No.
Tulip mania started in Holland, where tulips, and this was would it be the 1800s, something like that. We could check it out, people, on Wikipedia. Tulip mania. Suddenly tulips became very, very sought after in Europe and further afield, and it got to the stage where tulip bulbs were actually worth more than gold, and people were trading these things as commodities, and it was becoming absolutely ridiculous. In one instance, a sailor on a Dutch trading boat was very hungry, decided to break into a barrel which he thought was onions, and munched into a tulip bulb, which was at that time worth the equivalent of thousands and thousands of pounds nowadays. Now, even if he thought it was an onion, I'm thinking it's not exactly. He must have been really hungry to bite into this, but never mind a tulip bulb. And he ended up going to jail. But the whole thing became a bubble. It was the first example, really, of a bubble that burst, and everybody went, why did we ever think that was a good investment in the first place?
Well, interesting you use the word bubble, because there's references to bubbles in the play about how the railroads were in a bubble, and other things are in a bubble, and if we're trying to save our environment, then we'll need another bubble for that.
Absolutely.
And that's and then one of the analysts has a wonderful speech which shows that she supported Enron because she trusted Enron. Nothing more. There was nothing, and she goes on to talk about if you started analysing why a plane stays in the air, you would never fly.
Right. That's very true, actually.
That was her example of what happened here. I believed in Enron, and that was it, because people present things in such a positive way, and the analysts were saying, "Oh well, if it's Enron, it has to be right."
Right. Does the term cognitive dissonance come up at all?
No, it doesn't, but it is appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is appropriate.
And you find this in a lot of big organisations. It doesn't have to be private organisations. You find that even when you look at things that happened within the CIA, within our own government, there comes that point where everybody in the room, everybody's kind of sitting thinking, this is going to go horribly wrong. But you've got two camps. You've got the ones who get so heavily invested in it that they don't want it to stop. And it's like musical chairs. Right, as long as you're not the guy left without a chair when the music stops.
Wants to break ranks and be the first to say the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah. And that's what this was about, because Kenneth Lay, who we portray him as being, in business I've known people who are figureheads but know very little about the reality of things, and he's a bit like that. Yeah. So he plays golf with Bill Clinton and he does this and he does that. So from his point of view, it can't fail. It will not fail. I can't, regardless of what the real situation is, it can't fail, and that is his view throughout the whole play.
Yeah.
And eventually Andy Fastow has to destroy the Raptors because it's not sustainable anymore, and then of course the balls burst and we're in a situation of having to justify this. Arthur Anderson, they start worrying about their role in all of this, and they start destroying things.
Do you think it's got a disturbing contemporary resonance in as much as we now have the housing bubble and mortgages and the price of property going through the roof?
It's unbelievable. Unbelievably relevant to everything that's going on today. And there's even I've got an opening speech as a lawyer, and one of the lines is and it's talking about how we find ourselves great men. And it says, once in a while you find a great man and you hope to God he doesn't succeed.
Okay.
And you think of Trump, immediately you think, and it's that sort of thing. So it has a great relevance to today, and I think that's why audiences are so enthusiastic about it, because it does ring a bell. And at the end of the play, I mean, on Saturday night we had about 6 or 7 curtain calls, because the play hit the mark with the audience were there.
Brilliant. So have you been in touch with Lucy Prebble, the playwright, at all?
No, because we work through an agent.
Right.
That's the way to do it, and if she's interested, because the last play we did was the John Byrne Playwrights' Cramp.
Right.
So
I just at school.
You brilliant. You just hope that they might be interested. We did. This has gone back, maybe now about 15 years. We did Liz Lockhead's Dracula, and Liz Lockhead came along on the last night with her husband, and her husband turned to her and says, "I didn't know that play was funny." So we do get people who come in just interested, because our venue is quite unique. We've got exclusive rights to it, and we have a lovely garden at the back with a marquee where you can get a glass of wine or a beer. So the setup is really nice, especially on a day like this. It's not so good. And last week with all that rain, but the whole thing works quite well. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's quite relevant as well to yourself. I mean, you're director of a theatre company. I guess finances are something that you've got to keep a close...
Well, it's hard because we only have a membership of about 20 people.
Okay.
So this show has been particularly difficult, but there are mice heads involved in this.
Okay.
And we managed to buy them from Nottingham Playhouse, who had used in the previous. We also need raptor heads.
Okay.
We got them from Japan, and we also need a ventriloquist dummy. We got that on eBay. So these are additional expenses.
You've got to factor in.
Yeah, and with a capacity of 65, £12 or £10 a ticket, for 2 weeks, you've got to be getting big houses to make it viable.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're always conscious, but we've got a very good treasurer who keeps us on the straight and narrow when it comes to that. But the key thing that's driven this production has been everyone's enthusiasm for the play.
Yeah.
And even the traders involved in the dancing, they've been doing their own rehearsing, so everyone's totally committed to it, and it shows in performance. They're really up for it every night, and there's nothing like it in that venue. It's a fantastic venue to play in.
How many productions? I mean, other than your festival production, I mean, how many productions a year roughly do you do?
We only really do 2. I mean, we
Yeah.
do in April we did Writer's Cramp along with another play called Primrose Way. So these are our 2 main productions, but we're also involved in, I say, Burn Suppers. We've got a Burn Supper show,
Right.
and we do murder mysteries.
Brilliant!
That we develop our own scripts for.
Okay.
So the one that we're currently running with, and we've got 3 bookings later in this year, is based on the Great British Bake Off.
Okay.
Right.
So it's keeping it relevant.
And is that in the same venue? Or
No, we've got 2 bookings. We did it twice, so anyone that wants it, we can actually do it. So we're doing one in Lithgow, and we're actually doing our own. We're doing one for Sopra, who are at the top of Orchard Brae, the office on the right. The right. We're doing one there, and we're eventually doing our own one. Because we've never done it for our own people, so we did 2. So that's how we get additional funds, to ensure that we can. Because at our spring show we don't actually make a lot of money because it's only a week,
right.
So we depend on the Fringe to actually make enough money to support next year's activities.
Well, if you're making money at the Fringe, you're doing better than most.
Correct, yeah. I mean, as I say, we've got. The Fringe tickets. We've sold about 350 Fringe tickets already.
Okay.
Which is great. And on Wednesday we've sold 35 Fringe tickets, which is the total amount we give them. So there's a lot of Fringe interest, and it's more reviews. We don't find reviews help particularly. It's word of mouth that actually brings people along.
Okay.
Because by chance you might see a review, but so we depend on word of mouth.
So hopefully this podcast will drum up some word of mouth for you.
Yes, please come along because it's a great show. It's a great show.
And tell everyone where they can find you so we can make sure they know.
We are at St Ninian's Hall, which is in Cumbernabank Road, right next to the Waitrose Superstore. We're on until Saturday night, and we have a matinee at 2:30. On Saturday. The show starts at 7:30.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been good to hear about it. And do you fancy going to see that?
I absolutely do.
Okay, well, we'll be there.
Well, good. Well, I'll be around at the door, so when you come along, I'll be there to greet you. Because,
okay, good stuff.
Because I like to. I'm also responsible for making sure that ticket sales that come through our members are sorted, so that people come along and make sure we've got them on the list. So I'm responsible for that. My wife is the box office director.
Okay. Well, once again, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.